The gathering storm. The observation deck of the Zenthari flagship Crimson Talon pulsed with bioluminescent displays. Admiral Thrace Cole stood before the tactical projection, his scaled features twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind. Around him, 24 of his finest officers studied the pathetic formation floating ahead. "These are the humans?" Cole's voice dripped with contempt. "These rusted hulls dare call themselves a fleet?" The tactical display showed the human vessels in stark detail, outdated destroyers, patchwork cruisers, ships that looked cobbled together from salvage yards. Compared to the sleek, organic curves of Zenthari warships, they appeared laughably primitive. Officer Dren, youngest of the command staff, studied the readings more carefully. Something about the human formation bothered him, though he couldn't articulate why. They held position with unusual precision for such inferior vessels. "Permission to analyze their formation patterns, Admiral?" Dren asked. Cole waved a dismissive hand. "Waste no time on insects, officer. We'll crush them before your analysis completes." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Zenthari Empire had conquered 47 species. These humans would be 48. 5 million kilometers away, Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the same tactical display from the other side. His uniform bore scars from a dozen campaigns, and his gray eyes held depths that spoke of hard-won survival. "They're positioning for the killing blow," Lieutenant Nina Reeves reported from the navigation console. Her hands moved efficiently across the holographic controls, but Marcus noticed the slight tremor in her fingers. 3-to-1 odds, Captain. Maybe worse. "Noted, Lieutenant." Marcus kept his voice steady, calm. Leadership meant projecting confidence even when fear clawed at your throat. Nina turned to face him, her dark eyes searching his weathered features. "Sir, if I may speak freely?" "Always, Nina." "We look like we're about to be slaughtered." She gestured at the display. "Half our ships are running on backup power. Our armor's a decade behind theirs. Why aren't we requesting reinforcements from the colonies?" Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Because we don't want reinforcements, Lieutenant. We want them confident, arrogant." Confusion flickered across Nina's face. "I don't understand." "You will." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension there. "Trust me a little longer." "Trust the plan." Nina held his gaze for a long moment.
They'd served together for 3 years, and in that time she'd learned that Marcus Webb never wasted lives needlessly.
If he ordered them to look weak, there was a reason. "I trust you, sir," she said quietly. Something unspoken passed between them. Not quite romance. Not yet, but the foundation of something deeper than mere duty. War had a way of revealing what truly mattered. The comms crackled. "All ships, this is Resolute," Marcus announced. "Hold formation. Minimal power signatures. Let them think we're frightened." Acknowledgements came back one by one. 37 ships, each captain placing their lives in Marcus's hands. On the Crimson Talon, Cole watched the human fleet with growing amusement. They huddled together like prey animals. "Officer Dren, initiate attack sequence." "Admiral, their formation is unusual for—" "I gave you an order, officer." Dren swallowed his objections. "Yes, Admiral." "Charging weapons now." The Zenthari fleet advanced, each vessel a masterpiece of biological warfare technology. Their hulls shimmered with contained energy. Their weapons hummed with lethal promise. Marcus watched them come, his jaw set. On his console, a single indicator blinked yellow. "Not yet red." "Not yet time, Captain," Nina whispered. "They're powering weapons." "I see it." "Sir, we should—" "Hold position, Lieutenant." The yellow indicator continued blinking, steady, patient, waiting. Across the void, Cole raised his hand.
"Fire when ready."
"Let's end this farce quickly. I have a victory celebration to attend." More laughter from the Zenthari bridge, but Officer Dren stared at his readings, frowning. The humans weren't broadcasting distress signals. They weren't calling for help. They simply waited. Why would prey not run? The answer would come soon enough. And when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. Marcus Webb allowed himself the smallest smile. The trap. The mask of weakness green fire split the darkness. The first volley from the Zenthari fleet tore across space like vengeful lightning. Marcus gripped the railing as the Resolute shuddered, shields flaring white-hot under the bombardment. Direct hit on the Valiant. Nina's voice cracked with urgency. She's venting atmosphere! Through the viewport, Marcus watched the destroyer buckle. Metal screamed silently as sections peeled away, spinning into the void. 73 souls aboard. He forced himself to remember that number. Valiant is gone, sir, Nina reported, her face pale. The Meridian took critical damage, engines offline. Another explosion bloomed in the distance. The frigate Pathfinder shattered like glass, scattering debris that glowed briefly before fading to cold ash. Return fire, Captain? Corporal James Holt called from engineering. The young technician's hands flew across emergency repair protocols, sealing breaches as fast as they appeared. Negative, Marcus commanded. All ships hold fire. Maintain formation, Nina spun toward him. Sir, we're being torn apart. I know, Lieutenant. His voice remained eerily calm, even as another shockwave rocked the bridge. Hold the line. On the Crimson Talon, triumph echoed through every corridor. The human flagship still stands, Admiral, Dren reported, though 3 of their escorts are destroyed. Cole leaned back in his command throne, satisfaction radiating from his scaled features. Excellent. Let them watch their fleet die ship by ship. Fear is a weapon sharper than any blade. They're not returning fire, Dren observed carefully. Admiral, this is unusual behavior. Unusual? Call laughed, a harsh sound that scraped against the ears. It's pathetic, officer. They're paralyzed with terror. Their captains are too incompetent to even order retreat. But Dren couldn't shake his unease. He'd studied human history during his tactical training, specifically their performance in the Outer Rim skirmishes. Humans were known for their unpredictability, their refusal to accept defeat even when logic demanded it. This surrender without surrendering felt wrong. Fire again, Cole commanded. Concentrate on their cruisers. Break their backbone. Another wave of emerald destruction swept across the human formation. The Resolute trembled violently. Sparks erupted from a navigation console, forcing Nina to leap back. James appeared instantly with a fire suppressor, foam coating the damaged station. Shields at 40%, James shouted over the alarms. Captain, we can't take many more hits like that. Marcus watched his tactical display. The Ranger limped out of formation, trailing superheated plasma. The Defiant listed badly, half her weapons offline. 17 ships remained combat capable. 17 from 37. Nina moved to his side, close enough that he could see the fear and confusion warring in her eyes. Marcus, she said quietly, using his first name for the first time in 3 years. Please, tell me there's a reason for this. He turned to face her fully. Around them, the bridge crew worked frantically, but in that moment, it felt like they were alone. Marcus saw past her fear to the strength beneath, the same strength that had earned her a bridge position at just 26 years old. There's a reason, Nina, he said softly. I swear it on my life, on all our lives. She searched his face, looking for the lie, the doubt, the crack in his certainty. She found none. How long? She asked. Marcus glanced at his console. The yellow indicator still blinked. Soon, minutes, maybe less. And if it doesn't come, then I've killed us all. The admission cost him. She could see it in the tightness around his eyes. But it will come. It has to. Nina made a decision in that heartbeat. She reached out and squeezed his hand. Brief, barely a second, but enough. Then we hold. Then we hold, he echoed. Their formation is collapsing. A Zenthari officer crowed. Look how they scatter. Call rose from his throne, approaching the tactical display. The human fleet did indeed look ragged, broken. Ships drifted with damaged engines. Debris clouded their formation. It was the picture of defeat. Yet something nagged at him. Some detail his mind couldn't quite grasp. Dren saw it first. Admiral, they're still in formation. What? Look closer, sir. They appear scattered, but if you map their positions... Dren manipulated the display, overlaying trajectory vectors. They're maintaining a perfect defensive sphere. Even the damaged ships are exactly where they should be. Cole's eyes narrowed. Explain. Their formation only looks broken. It's deliberate. They're creating the illusion of collapse while maintaining tactical coherence. Dren's voice grew urgent. Admiral, this is a trained response. They're executing a strategy. A strategy? Call's voice dripped skepticism. What strategy involves letting yourself be destroyed? Dren had no answer. But his instinct screamed warning. Continue the assault, Cole ordered. Whatever game they play ends now. Charge the primary cannon. Target their flagship. The Crimson Talon's main weapon began to glow, accumulating enough energy to vaporize a small moon. Around it, the Xanthari fleet pressed forward, eager for the kill. They're charging their dreadnought cannon, Nina reported, her voice steady now despite the terror of what that meant. Targeting us directly, Captain. Time to impact, 90 seconds. Marcus looked at his console. The yellow indicator continued its patient blinking. Sir, James called from engineering, if that cannon fires and we're still here, I know, Corporal. 60 seconds. The crew looked to him, some frightened, some resigned, all trusting. Nina stood beside him, her hand resting near his on the railing, not touching but close. A silent promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. 30 seconds. Captain, Nina whispered. Marcus, the yellow indicator turned green. Marcus smiled. All ships, he broadcast across the fleet, his voice ringing with sudden iron certainty. Prepare for quantum wake. She's here! Nina's eyes went wide. She? The stars behind them began to disappear. On the Crimson Talon, every alarm suddenly screamed at once. Admiral! Dren shouted. Massive spatial distortion. Directly behind the human fleet. Something's... The darkness opened its eyes, and the galaxy held its breath. Shadows in the void, the sensors couldn't measure it. That was the first impossibility. Officer Dren stared at his console as the readings spiraled into chaos. Mass estimates flickered from millions to billions of tons. Energy signatures spiked beyond any scale in the Xanthari database. The computer simply displayed unknown. What is that? Call demanded, his earlier confidence evaporating like frost in sunlight. The darkness behind the human fleet wasn't empty space anymore. It was something. A shadow so vast it seemed to bend reality around itself, swallowing stars wholesale as it emerged from whatever dimension it had been hiding in. I can't... Dren's hands trembled over his controls. Admiral, our sensors can't properly scan it. It's too large. The computer thinks there's an error. There is no error, Call snarled. Find out what that is. But the computers had no answers. Only warnings. Hundreds of warnings, cascading across every screen. On the Resolute, the mood transformed in seconds. Distance to anomaly? Marcus asked calmly, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Nina worked her console with renewed vigor, all trace of fear replaced by fierce concentration. 20,000 kilometers in closing. Captain, it's reading as a single object. Mass? Approximately... Nina's voice faltered. Sir, this can't be right. Approximately 40 million tons. Silence gripped the bridge. James broke it with a breathless laugh. She actually came. The Leviathan is real. The name rippled through the crew like electricity. The Leviathan. Humanity's most classified secret. A ship so massive, so powerful, that its very existence had been deemed too dangerous to reveal until the moment of absolute necessity. That moment was now. Open a channel to Leviathan Command, Marcus ordered. Static crackled. Then a voice emerged, cold, precise, weighted with authority that made even Marcus straighten unconsciously. This is Admiral Victoria Cross of the Leviathan. Captain Webb, report your status. 17 combat-capable ships remaining, Admiral. Holding formation as ordered. The enemy has taken our bait. Excellent work, Captain. A pause. All human vessels, this is Admiral Cross. Fall back to minimum safe distance. The Leviathan is assuming command of this battlefield. Marcus turned to Nina. You heard the Admiral. Get us clear, Lieutenant. Nina's fingers danced across her console. Course laid in, sir. All ships acknowledging. They're moving. The human fleet, battered and bleeding, began a slow withdrawal. But not a retreat. They moved with the same disciplined precision they'd maintained throughout the slaughter, even as the thing behind them continued to emerge from impossible darkness. Pilot Rachel Stone gripped her fighter's controls, her knuckles white. From her cockpit, she had the best view of anyone in the human fleet, and what she saw defied comprehension. The Leviathan emerged like a mountain rising from the sea. Its bow alone dwarfed the Resolute. Then came the main hull, kilometer after kilometer of dark metal plating, inscribed with lines that glowed a deep, ancient blue. Weapons ports opened along its flanks like the eyes of some great beast awakening from millennium-long slumber. Holy, Rachel breathed. She'd heard the stories, the whispers, and pilot bars. She'd dismissed them as military mythology, but it was real, all of it. The Leviathan continued its emergence. 5 kilometers. 10. 15. Its shadow fell across the entire battlefield, casting the human fleet into protective darkness. When it finally cleared its hiding place, some fold in space that Rachel's civilian-trained mind couldn't understand, the ship's full majesty became apparent. 23 kilometers from bow to stern. A titan among ships. A weapon that shouldn't exist. All fighters, maintain formation, came the order from Leviathan Command. Do not approach within 5,000 meters of the Leviathan's hull. Weapons range is everything beyond. Rachel pulled back, giving the monster room to work. On the Crimson Talon, panic began to spread. We need to retreat, Dren said urgently. Admiral, whatever that is, we retreat from nothing. Call slammed his fist on the console, but his voice carried an edge of hysteria. It's a trick! Some kind of human deception. Sir, your scanners are wrong. It's impossible for any ship to be that large. Call's scales flushed dark purple, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. All ships concentrate fire on that thing. Destroy it before it fully emerges. The Zenthari fleet obeyed, though their movements lacked the confident aggression of minutes before. Thousands of weapons spoke as one, sending a wall of destructive energy toward the Leviathan. The bombardment struck the Titan's hull with enough force to atomize a city. Light bloomed across its dark surface, explosions rippling along its armor. Then the light faded. The Leviathan was unmarked, untouched, as if the Zenthari had thrown pebbles at a mountain. Impossible, Call whispered. Dren couldn't look away from his sensors. The energy absorption rates were beyond anything in known physics. The Leviathan hadn't even needed to raise shields. Its hull simply ate the attack. Admiral, Dren said quietly, we should retreat. Now, while we still can. Nina watched the tactical display as the Leviathan completed its emergence. The ship oriented itself with ponderous grace, its bow turning to face the Zenthari fleet. She felt Marcus move closer, his presence solid and reassuring. Have you ever seen her before? She asked softly. Once, during the commissioning ceremony 15 years ago. Marcus's voice held reverence. I was just a lieutenant then. They brought us to a hidden shipyard beyond Neptune, showed us what humanity had built in secret, made us swear oaths that would have meant execution if we'd broken them. Why keep it secret? Because the moment you reveal a weapon like that, every species in the galaxy either becomes your enemy or tries to steal your technology. He glanced at her. Better to be underestimated. Better to look weak while you're actually preparing something like this. Nina felt a surge of emotion, pride, relief, and something more complicated as she looked at Marcus. He'd known. All through the bombardment, all through the losses, he'd known salvation was coming. The trust that required the iron will to watch your people die while holding to the plan. Marcus, she said, then stopped, unsure how to articulate what she felt. He seemed to understand anyway. His hand found hers in the space between their stations, squeezing gently. We held the line, Nina, all of us together. That's what matters. Captain, the Leviathan is preparing to fire, James reported, his voice tinged with awe. Marcus released Nina's hand, but the warmth lingered. All ships maximum distance from the firing solution. This is going to be loud. The Leviathan's primary weapons began to glow, not the harsh green of Zenthari energy weapons, but a deep, resonant blue that seemed to pull at the very fabric of space. Admiral Victoria Cross's voice cut across all channels, calm as death itself. Target, Zenthari flagship Crimson Talon, firing main cannon. The universe held its breath. Then the Leviathan spoke. The Titan awakens, the weapon didn't roar. It sang. A single beam of concentrated energy, deep blue threaded with white fire, erupted from the Leviathan's primary cannon. It crossed the 20,000 kilometers between ships in less than a second, reality bending around its passage like water around a knife. The Crimson Talon never had a chance. Officer Dren watched his screens turn white, then black. When his vision cleared, the flagship was simply Gone. Not exploded. Not scattered. Erased. Where the pride of the Xanthari fleet had floated moments before, there was only empty space and a slowly dissipating energy signature. "Admiral?" Dren whispered to the empty air. Then, louder, his voice breaking, "Admiral Cole?" No response. Cole hadn't even had time to scream. Dren found himself suddenly in command of what remained of the Xanthari fleet, his mind struggling to process the impossible death he'd just witnessed. Around him, the bridge crew of the Talon's Shadow, the second command ship, stared in horror. "Sir?" an officer whispered. "Your orders." Dren couldn't speak. Couldn't think. His entire education, his lifetime of military training, offered no protocol for this situation. The Empire didn't lose. The Empire conquered, but the humans had just erased their greatest warship with a single shot. On the Resolute, Nina watched the energy readings spike and collapse. "Direct hit. The flagship is..." "Captain, it's gone. There's no debris field, nothing." "Quantum disintegration," Marcus explained quietly. "The Leviathan doesn't just destroy ships. It unmakes them at the atomic level." James let out a low whistle from engineering. 15 years they've been building this thing? 23, actually, Marcus corrected. Started right after first contact with the Xanthari, when we realized how outgunned we were. He pulled up a file on his personal console, classified documentation he could finally access. The Leviathan consumed 30% of humanity's industrial output for 2 decades. Every secret shipyard, every hidden asteroid mine, all working toward one goal: survival. Nina moved closer to read over his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. The proximity sent a shiver through him that had nothing to do with the battle. 23 years of preparation, she murmured. That's incredible. That's desperation, Marcus countered. We knew eventually someone would try to wipe us out. Better to be ready. He turned his head slightly, finding her face inches from his. Better to look weak while hiding something like this. Their eyes met and held. The chaos of battle seemed to fade for a moment, just a moment, as something unspoken passed between them. "Captain," James called awkwardly. "The Leviathan is hailing us." Marcus straightened, the moment broken but not forgotten. On screen, the view screen flickered, and Admiral Victoria Cross appeared. She was older than Marcus by perhaps 15 years, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her uniform immaculate despite commanding a ship that had just obliterated a Xanthari flagship. But it was her eyes that commanded attention. Cold gray, sharp as broken glass, holding the weight of terrible decisions. "Captain Webb, excellent work maintaining the formation under fire." "Thank you, Admiral. We held as long as we could. Longer than expected, actually. I anticipated losing at least 25 ships." Cross's expression didn't soften, but something that might have been approval flickered there. "Your crew performed admirably. All human vessels, this is Admiral Cross. We are now on full offensive. Weapons free. Show them what happens when humanity stops pretending." The transmission ended. Marcus turned to his crew, seeing their exhaustion, their barely contained fear transforming into something fiercer. "You heard the Admiral. Lieutenant Reeves, bring weapons online. Corporal Holt, I want maximum power to shields and engines. All stations, prepare for combat operations." "Yes, sir." The responses came sharp and eager. Nina worked her console with swift confidence. "Weapons hot, Captain. Target lock on 3 Xanthari cruisers. Fire at will, Lieutenant." The Resolute had been silent throughout the slaughter, absorbing punishment without response. Now she showed her teeth. Missiles streaked from her launch tubes. Energy cannons carved glowing lines across the darkness. All around her, the human fleet awakened with similar fury, but it was the Leviathan that truly commanded the battlefield. The Titan advanced slowly, majestically, like a god walking among mortals. Its secondary weapons, each one larger than the main guns of a standard destroyer, began tracking targets with frightening precision. Multiple lock warnings. A Xanthari officer screamed across the command channel. "It's targeting everything." The Leviathan fired again. And again. Each shot was surgical, precise, devastating. A Xanthari battlecruiser exploded as its reactor core was breached. 2 destroyers were sheared in half by a sustained beam. A carrier disintegrated into component atoms, its fighter wings dying with it. Dren watched his fleet die ship by ship. "All vessels, scatter!" Evasive maneuvers, but it was like trying to dodge falling mountains. The Leviathan's targeting systems were perfect. Every shot found its mark. Every target fell. Rachel Stone pulled her fighter into a tight spiral, watching the Leviathan's secondary batteries track and eliminate targets with rhythmic efficiency. She'd never seen anything so beautiful and terrible. This is Stone to all fighter wings. The big girl's doing the heavy lifting. Let's clean up the smaller targets. Her squadron fell in behind her, 12 fighters moving in perfect formation. They swept through the chaos, targeting Xanthari fighters and damaged cruisers, their smaller weapons perfect for finishing what the Leviathan had started. Rachel spotted a Xanthari destroyer trying to flee, its engines burning hot as it attempted to break away. Stone to Leviathan Command. We have a runner at Vector 47. Acknowledged, Stone. Admiral Cross's voice remained as calm as if discussing weather patterns. Engaging! A beam of blue light, almost casual in its application, reached out across 40,000 kilometers. The destroyer lasted 1.3 seconds before joining the void. Thanks for the assist. Admiral, Rachel said, grinning despite herself. Focus on your assigned targets. Pilot. Yes, ma'am. On the bridge of the Resolute. Marcus watched the tactical display transform. The Xanthari fleet, so confident mere minutes ago, was disintegrating. Ships scattered in all directions, some trying to fight, most trying to flee, none succeeding. Their formation is completely broken, Nina reported. They're in full rout, Captain. Casualties on our side? The Defiant took another hit but is still operational. Otherwise, all remaining ships are holding together. Nina's voice carried wonder. We're winning. We're actually winning. Marcus allowed himself to feel it, the weight lifting from his shoulders, the terrible certainty of death replaced by the shock of survival. Around him, the bridge crew worked with renewed energy, their movements sharper, their voices carrying hope instead of despair. He looked at Nina and found her already watching him. She smiled, really smiled, bright and alive, and something in his chest tightened. Lieutenant, he said formally, aware of the crew around them, you have the con. I need to review casualty reports. Yes, sir. But her eyes said something different. We made it. We survived together. Marcus moved to his ready room, the door sliding shut behind him. He stood alone for a moment, allowing the tremor in his hands to finally show, allowing the fear he'd suppressed to wash through him. They'd held the line. Against impossible odds, they'd trusted the plan and it had worked. The door chimed. Come. Nina entered, the hatch closing behind her. For a moment they simply looked at each other. No longer captain and lieutenant, but Marcus and Nina, two people who'd stared down death together. I should be on the bridge, she said softly. You should, he agreed. Neither moved. Then Nina crossed the small space between them, and Marcus met her halfway. They came together not with passion but with relief, with the desperate need to confirm they were both alive. His arms wrapped around her, her face pressed against his chest, and for a moment the war could wait. I trusted you, she whispered against his uniform. Even when I was terrified, I trusted you. I know. Marcus held her tighter. I know, and I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell anyone. Don't apologize for keeping us alive. Nina pulled back just enough to look up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Promise me something, Marcus. Anything. When this is over, really over, we talk about this. About us. He smiled, the first genuine smile in hours. That's a promise, Lieutenant. The moment stretched, warm and precious. Then duty called them back. Nina straightened her uniform, Marcus composed himself, and they returned to the bridge together. Outside, the Leviathan continued its work. The Xanthari fleet, once so mighty, burned in the darkness, and for the first time in the war, humanity stood victorious. The day they stopped laughing. Retreat was chaos. Officer Dren commanded what remained of the Xanthari fleet, 17 ships from a force of 70, and every one of them was fleeing as fast as their engines could burn. Behind them, the Leviathan watched like a patient predator, not pursuing, but not forgotten. Secure all channels, Dren ordered, his voice hoarse from shouting commands during the rout. I don't want the humans intercepting our communications. Sir, what do we tell the Empire? An officer asked. How do we explain this? Dren stared at the view screen, where the Leviathan silhouette was finally fading into the distance. How did you explain the impossible? How did you tell an empire that had conquered 47 species that humans had shattered their finest fleet. We tell them the truth, Dren said quietly, that we encountered a weapon beyond our calculations. That humanity is not what we believed, that we underestimated them catastrophically. He thought of Admiral Cole's laughter, his arrogance, his absolute certainty in Zenthari superiority. All of it erased in a single blue flash, and sir, the officer pressed, do we recommend a renewed assault? Dren turned to face his crew, seeing his own doubt reflected in their eyes. No, we recommend negotiation, immediately, before they decide to use that monster for offense instead of defense. The words tasted like ashes, but they were true. The human fleet gathered around the Leviathan like children seeking protection from a benevolent giant. 17 ships had survived the battle, though most bore scars that would take months to repair. The dead numbered 3,217. Marcus stood alone in his ready room reviewing the names. 3,000 souls under his command. He'd known the cost would be high, but reading each name carved something cold and permanent into his heart. Lieutenant Daniels, Ensign Cho, Corporal Martinez. On and on, a litany of the fallen. The door chimed. Come, he said without looking up. Nina entered quietly, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She set one on his desk, then settled into the chair across from him. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sharing the weight of survival and loss. The casualty reports? She asked gently. Yes. Marcus closed the file but didn't push it away. 3,217. Almost exactly 10% of our total force. We held the line, Nina said firmly. You saved 90%, Marcus. In a battle we were supposed to lose completely. Tell that to the families of the 3,000. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up. Every captain makes decisions that cost lives. Doesn't make it easier. Nina reached across the desk, her hand covering his. No, it doesn't, but you gave them a chance to mean something. They died protecting humanity, and because of that sacrifice, we won. That matters. Marcus turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The contact was warm, grounding, real. When did you get so wise, Lieutenant? About the same time my captain taught me that looking weak can be the strongest strategy. She smiled softly. You've been teaching me a lot lately. Before Marcus could respond, his comm chirped. Captain Webb, Admiral Cross requests your presence on the Leviathan immediately. Marcus and Nina exchanged glances. A summons from Victoria Cross was not something you delayed. Acknowledged. On my way. The shuttle ride to the Leviathan took 20 minutes, and every moment of it filled Marcus with awe. Up close, the Titan was even more magnificent. Its hull stretched in all directions, vast beyond measure, inscribed with equations and formulae that apparently enhanced its shield geometry. Running lights pulsed along its flanks like the heartbeat of something, alive. The shuttle bay could have held the Resolute 3 times over with room to spare. Marcus was met by a security detail and escorted through, corridors that felt more like the interior of a cathedral than a warship. Everything was built on a massive scale, designed for a crew that numbered in the tens of thousands. He was led to the bridge, a command center so large it had its own weather system, mist gathering near the distant ceiling. Admiral Victoria Cross stood at the center of it all, hands clasped behind her back, staring at a tactical display that showed the entire sector. Captain Webb, she said without turning, thank you for coming. Admiral. Marcus approached, stopping at what he judged was a respectful distance. You wanted to see me? I wanted to commend you. Cross finally turned, her gray eyes measuring him. Your performance today was exemplary. You held your fleet together under impossible circumstances. You trusted the plan without question. That takes a special kind of courage. I did my duty, Admiral. So modest. A faint smile touched Cross's lips. I've been commanding the Leviathan for 5 years, Captain. Do you know how often I've had to intervene in actual combat? No, ma'am. Twice, including today. Because most situations resolve themselves once both sides understand the balance of power. She gestured at the view screen, where the retreating Zenthari fleet was still visible as tiny specks. But this time was different. The Zenthari needed to see what happens when they push us too far. They needed to understand that humanity's patience has limits. Marcus nodded slowly. And now they do. Now they do, Cross agreed. Within 48 hours, the Zenthari Empire will request peace negotiations. Within a week, they'll offer us 3 systems and full trade rights as reparations. We'll accept 2 systems and limited trade, then spend the next decade building our strength while they recover from the psychological blow. You've already calculated all this. Strategy is what I do. Captain. Cross moved closer, her presence commanding without being threatening. Which brings me to my next point. The Leviathan needs a new executive officer. My current XO is retiring, and I need someone who understands the weight of command. Someone who can hold the line when everything looks hopeless. Marcus felt his heart skip. Admiral, I'm honored, but you're thinking about your crew. Your ship. Your Lieutenant Reeves. Cross's smile widened fractionally. I'm not blind, Captain. I saw how you two looked at each other during the battle reports. Heat crept up Marcus's neck. With respect, Admiral, don't be embarrassed. Command is lonely enough without denying yourself human connection. Cross returned to the tactical display. I'm not offering the position immediately, Captain. The Resolute needs her commander for at least another year. But when you're ready, when you've processed what happened today and decided what you want your future to look like, the offer stands. Thank you, Admiral. I'll consider it. See that you do? Cross dismissed him with a nod. And Captain, tell Lieutenant Reeves she performed admirably today. She has a bright future ahead of her. Marcus left the bridge feeling lighter somehow, the weight of command balanced by the promise of possibility. Nina was waiting when Marcus returned to the Resolute. She'd cleaned up. Fresh uniform, hair pulled back properly, but exhaustion still showed in the set of her shoulders. How was the Admiral? She asked. Terrifying and impressive in equal measure, Marcus replied honestly. He gestured toward his ready room. Walk with me. They entered together, the door sliding shut behind them. For a moment they simply stood there, the events of the day settling around them like dust after battle. Admiral Cross offered me a position on the Leviathan, Marcus said quietly. Executive officer. Nina's expression flickered. Surprise, pride, and something that might have been disappointment. That's amazing, Marcus. You'd be perfect for it. I'm not accepting. Not yet. He moved closer, closing the distance between them. I have responsibilities here. A crew that needs their captain. A very talented lieutenant who I'd like to get to know better once regulations allow. Nina looked up at him, hope dawning in her dark eyes. Once regulations allow? Well, you know how it is. Captain and subordinate officer, fraternization rules, all that proper military protocol. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. But perhaps once this tour ends, once you get your promotion, and you will, Nina, you've earned it, we could have that conversation we promised each other. I'd like that, Nina said softly. Then, after a pause, how long is this tour again? 8 more months. That's a long time. Captain. It is, Lieutenant. Marcus reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that was just slightly too familiar for regulations, but not quite crossing the line. But we're patient people. We know how to wait for the right moment. Nina caught his hand, holding it against her cheek for a brief second before stepping back. 8 months. I'll mark my calendar. They stood like that, connected by promise and potential, until duty called them back to their stations. There would be time later, time to explore what they'd found in the crucible of battle. For now, they had a fleet to shepherd home, repairs to oversee, and families to notify. 3 days later, the Zenthari Empire transmitted an official request for peace negotiations. A week after that, the news spread across human colonies like wildfire. Earth's population celebrated in the streets. The outer settlements lit bonfires that could be seen from orbit. Humanity had faced the Empire and survived, but it was the other species who truly took notice. Races that had lived under Zenthari dominance whispered among themselves, the humans have a weapon. The humans made the Empire retreat. Perhaps we too could stand against them. Seeds of rebellion took root in conquered worlds. The balance of galactic power began its slow but inevitable shift. Officer Dren, working through the diplomatic channels, found himself meeting with human representatives. He spoke honestly about what he'd witnessed, holding nothing back. When asked why he was cooperating, he gave the only answer that mattered. Because I saw what happens when arrogance meets reality. The Empire spent centuries believing itself superior. In one day, humanity taught us humility. He paused, then added quietly, it was a lesson we desperately needed. 8 months passed in the rhythm of military life. The Resolute was repaired, upgraded, and returned to active duty. Captain Marcus Webb led his crew through patrol missions, diplomatic escorts, and one brief skirmish with pirates that ended badly for the pirates. Lieutenant Nina Reeves earned her promotion to lieutenant commander and a commendation for her performance during the Battle of Threshold, as historians were already calling it. On the day their tour officially ended, Marcus found Nina in the observation deck, watching the stars drift past. "Permission to speak freely, Commander?" he asked with formal precision. Nina turned, smiling at the familiar dance they'd been performing for months. "Permission granted, Captain,"